Hello, and welcome to another week of the Storied Arcs podcast. I am your co-host, Mike.
And I'm your co-host, Alex.
And today we will be diving into The Bunker, Volume 1, Issues 1 through 4. So the spoiler lid from last week is fully lifted for these issues. We will not go beyond issue 4. I literally can't. That's as far as I read. I suspect you have now read or reread the entire series, but
I have not reread the full series yet. I mean, I have read it. As I mentioned last week, I have read the entire series previously, but that was several years ago. So I have not read to completion yet again for this time through. You know, letting each volume kind of sit and digest a little longer as I think about them. So
yeah, well, let's dive right into that. I mean, it is a high concept book in some ways, but being told as an intimate character study.
Yeah, it's very
which I
focused.
think is an interesting juxtaposition.
Yeah,
which again, not unlike Lost.
Well, I was just going to say that it's very similar to Lost, except one of the big things with Lost was its sprawling cast, which again was the point. You know, you had like a dozen or so characters that you're following and seeing how their lives intertwine, and you know, each episode, you know, was focusing on one character, and that was all very deliberate. Here we have 5 people who ultimately, as far as they're concerned, as far as we the reader are concerned, like the 5 most important people in the world, or who will end up being the most important people in the world, right? So yes. So we have a small limited cast, but you're right, it still has that super high concept of some level of time travel or time manipulation. But I think the interesting thing here in terms of time travel, and we went into this last week a little bit, talking about the different types of time travel stories, and this kind of being a closed loop here, or seemingly a closed loop. The idea of sending information back specifically to your past self, and like what kind of mindset. I'll start here, I guess. We'll start real high concept. Our 5 characters. You know, we have Billy, Daniel, Natasha, Heidi, and Grady. Our 5 characters in the future, after the world has basically ended. What do you think their mindset is as they prepare the bunker to send back to their past selves? Like, what do you think the future versions of those characters think they're trying to accomplish?
Okay, that's a good question, because like I said in the Zero, this comic makes me pause and question, like, are all time travel stories basically closed loop? Mm-hmm. Which there are actually indications in both directions in this volume.
There are.
However, so either is it old Billy who is with our cast? He like actually got in the vault and traveled back with them.
It's old Grady's in the cast.
Old Grady, right.
Yeah,
so old Grady.
Old Billy is the one who writes kind of the main letter.
Right. So old Grady has shown back up.
Yes.
And he would have only done that if he had the assistance of old Grady the first time he went through it.
Well, and that's what I was going to say is,
and for him to omit that information seems like this is a different cycle that they're taking them through. That's what I was thinking of, cycle, because the idea of any of these kind of closed loop systems is that the past never changes; it's just experienced in a different order, right? Yeah,
you know, so all that changes is the perspective of the character, and in this case, the reader or the audience, in terms of when information is shown to you and when they realize it. So there's never in those traditional stories, there's never a quote unquote first time through.
Right.
There's never a virgin time through where it never happens. So the older versions of these characters have no memory of finding the bunker or anything like that. But the moment they decide to go back in time and change it, does that automatically change their memories? Or, as you say, does it start a new, you know what I'm saying? Does it start a new cycle? Are we in is the hope that they're creating a branch timeline, meaning that they went through their lives the first time, burying this time capsule and not finding a bunker. You go through it the first time, they ascend to whatever positions they ascend to in the future, end the world, send this information back to their past selves and create a branch timeline, or is it presented in a way that this is how it always happened? You know,
right? Well, which is how everything else we've read is, and
and how most and how in general all closed loop systems are. I mean that's the whole point of a closed loop kind of time system.
Since it's been like 3 years since we talked about Paper Girls, there are three basic buckets that every time travel thing will fall into. There is the closed loop, which is fixed timeline, deterministic. There are no paradoxes to resolve. This is time is immutable. Everything always happens because that's how it already happened. It's very Harry Potter. It's very Time Before Time, Paper Girls. Mild spoilers, I guess, for those, but that's the mechanism. That's not the story.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's the branching timeline, which is what the MCU has ultimately decided to go with.
It's also Back to the Future. That's the one.
Yes, Back to the Future.
Every time you go back, the smallest little thing changes and it erases the old timeline and creates a new one.
Right. So the original timeline is still immutable in that timeline because you're creating a branch reality.
Yes,
and you're living in it. And as far as you're concerned, and you can't, in theory, I think in good branch. You probably can't get back to the branch you came from.
That's what I was saying. In the MCU, the idea is you can cancel out your branches and get back to the original timeline. Back to the Future states that you can't. Every time you go back, you change. Just the act of going back erases the original one and creates a new timeline, and you can never revisit the prime timeline. That it's the butterfly effect. It's the way that everyone.
I'm glad you said butterfly effect, because the third category, which some people debate whether this is a category, but I think it's between the two, is what the elastic model of time travel, which I call it the river model. That time is like a river, disruptions cause ripples. They use that analogy exactly in Days of Future Past, where you can drop a big rock in the river, and that's your interruption in the timeline. The river will go around it, like you slightly changed the course of the river, but the river, you did not change the direction of the river. You didn't build a dam or anything. Like, stuff is still going to happen. You just changed the way that things are going to get there, and that's really Donnie Darko. Highly debatable, but Donnie Darko, literally, the movie The Butterfly Effect, X-Men Days of Future Past, of like, you changed the way in which these things come about, but you probably didn't ultimately change the direction of history. And that is my guess for the bunker. Because
sorry, before you get to that, that is also that's fairly similar to what you see in something like Back to the Future,
Right. Well, that's also true. I mean, I think the elasticity you can you can bend that into each of the other theories, but I think a lot of people still recognize it as a standalone theory because some people are so staunch with the determinism of you can't have even affected the path of it because you've already done that.
Yeah. I can see. I mean, in my mind, the third version of time travel is where nothing matters. That's the Bill and Ted version. Where
I call that a fourth bucket. The nihilism.
Where it's just that you can manipulate and do whatever. There are no rules, and fundamentally things don't change because in those types of stories, time travel is not the point of the story. It is just something. It's a tool that they use to tell some other story. The Doctor Who is very similar to that, where you can jump through time and space and manipulate and talk to whomever. Although I guess one could presume in a Doctor Who story that the Doctor meeting and talking to these people throughout history is what causes and forces the event. So maybe it's less about that he is having the effect versus having no effect. But it ultimately ends up being the same way. I tend to agree with you because I think where you're going in terms of where this story might be is closer to that middle model, right? That little more elastic and or branching timeline thing, and not fully
Right. But
closed loop.
I think the tide of this is so this is such an interesting case study because in Lost, you have a plane full of strangers who
Yes.
inherit this task.
Yeah.
And in Paper Girls, you have a group of friends who would die for each other to some extent. I mean, there's the new kid, but she is not antithetical in any way. There's no distrust over her being the new kid or anything like that. She's just in the group by the
They were
time they're
nominally
doing stuff
friends.
together.
They were acquaintances. They all knew of each other, but like they weren't.
Right, but there was still kind of the one outsider.
Yeah.
And here, it sounds like a lot of the problems in the future are caused by the fracture in this friend group.
Yeah.
And these letters that they've received start causing that fracture. Meaning, like, we never had the moment where they're all on the same page. Like, they're all rowing in the same direction, working for the same thing. Except, arguably, when they're, like, out in the woods at the beginning, there's a few pages where, but even then, Grady was kind of the outsider there.
Yeah.
Um,
but I think those in this opening pages, like that's just any friend group though, right? You get the assumption that these people have been friends for, when the book starts, they're meant to be like just out of college, right? Early 20s, because the whole idea is like the next day they're all going off to start their careers or whatnot. So we got people
Right.
that have probably been friends. Well, I mean, there's a pair of siblings in there, Heidi and Billy are siblings, but you have a group of friends that you assume have been at least through college together and maybe even earlier. So you have that, you get a sense that the way that they talk to and with each other, there's a lived-in sense there. I didn't get the sense anyone was an outsider so much. It's more that just that, like, the way they kind of rib on each other and whatnot. It was just, but.
I mean, I think Grady using all of the politically incorrect language and stuff is like perhaps him leaning into a little bit of outsider status that also creates the outsider status. Like, I know people like that, and there have been people like that in the friend group where it's just like, why do you make yourself like this?
Yeah.
Well,
yeah, I guess that is Billy who's doing that, and he's constantly someone's always throwing him back on that.
Well, and Billy from the very first day they met was like, get off my bike,
yeah,
I don't like this guy. So he's always been a problem in their friendship.
Which I guess then in a way for the reader that tracks when they get into the bunker, in page 6 or whatever it is, he doesn't have an envelope. He doesn't have a letter. Now we find out that he is writing the letter that Grady is reading, but he doesn't have an envelope of information. Everyone else wrote one back. And so you're right there. There is kind of an outsider-ish status there. But I see what you're saying. The idea of like the minute a bit of turbulence was dropped into this friend group, which ultimately are these letters that they wrote to themselves, like the smallest bit of turbulence,
romantic relationships
fall apart. The whole thing falls apart. Yeah. Which does tell you that maybe
which means there's already the distrust there. Yeah. And when you have one emerging as a leader and they're all skeptical of his charisma, his leadership, and you have another that, I'm sticking with my theory that, Grady is a bit of an outsider, certainly the least liked within the group. I'm not saying he's the least likable, although I happen to think he also is, but he is the least liked. He has one close friend in the group, and the rest of the group kind of tolerates him because of his one inroad. And you find out, that he's going to
become president.
Right. Wait, was it? I thought it was Daniel who became president in the future. Is it Grady?
Grady becomes president. Daniel runs the pharmaceutical
technology.
company.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. The that creates whatever super resistant.
I'm sure I had it right in my head, but when I wrote down my notes, I had swapped those two roles.
Yeah.
But again, this is the type of stuff that, like, that's what confuses me when you just dive in with a cast this size. Even is you don't have a single POV that you're following for 44 pages in the first issue. It keeps alternating, and it's not just alternating 5 people's POV, it's past and future time jumps and things like that.
Yeah.
Which is
so it's
really like
10.
10
It's
POVs. Exactly. Yeah. Which it's a lot to keep track of, but like it's here's the positive way to say it. It stands up really well to reread. Because I finished, the 4 issues and then went back and read the first issue and was already like, oh, I like this so much more. Even after just getting a few more chapters with the characters.
It does help, I think, if helping remind the reader of who everyone is. And you're right, even though it's a small cast, because of all the jumps, it can be a little disorienting for some readers, and I get that, but I agree. Reading it through, especially I think the first volume, even like the first issue, going back and reading it again, like almost immediately before going in issue 2, I think can help reinforce a lot of that. Then, because now you have some of the beats down, you kind of know what the story structure is, and you can focus on character and lock in on each one of the 5.
Yes.
and let that kind of really cement, because you're right, the high concept premise that they drop on you in the first issue can be overwhelming, where you're like, well, now I'm trying to figure out the timeline stuff. Who is this? What's going on here? How do these connect? And that can cloud, I think, your ability to be like, all right, and now who is this person? And like, wait, which one was her, and what was she doing in the past, and now in the and you're trying to figure out all that at once. And I think if you go back again and you've accepted what the premise is and just focus on a character reread, so I think that can help lock
that's
in.
That's basically what I needed. I was like, I don't need any beats that were missing or anything like that. Let me ask you a 2-part question about Heidi. One, do you feel like this issue or series should perhaps have a trigger warning?
I mean,
for sensitive topics.
I mean, potentially, that wasn't a thing in 2014.
Right. Right. I'm saying if it came out now, would there be some kind of, even if it's just online, if it's not like printed on the cover or anything?
It wouldn't. I mean, it wouldn't be on the cover. No book would do that. I think that it's the kind of thing nowadays that there would be maybe something at the end of the issue, in terms of a hotline, where to reach out, something like that, for anyone who would experience the things that Heidi had. I'm also trying to think if there was a softer way to launch into that, but I think the buildup of that.
Well, let me just say, I don't know, ripping the Band-Aid off and not, like, it would have been super annoying. I think a lesser writer would have hinted at something in her past for 10 issues
and dragged it all the way out.
By the time they get there, you don't care anymore.
Yeah.
That being said, I found it a little shocking. And then part 2 of the question was, in 2025, do you think it is right, or would it be acceptable for a male writer to write this backstory for a female character, especially when it is essentially a defining personality trait for her? That's victimhood. Like, I think that, and I'm not saying I even have a problem with it. I'm just saying, is that the type of thing we do anymore? And I think the question is really just about, like, I can see, like, from the standpoint of representation, of saying, like, now perhaps he's got like a close personal friend, and he like asked, like, can I like riff off of your experience a little bit to tell the story, to like build out a character, and ultimately tell a good story. And really, like, as far as I can tell, the only thing that Heidi's backstory is leading to is her having trust issues in relationships, which they explicitly spell out. Like, I don't trust anything or anyone, nothing helps.
I think I definitely have to answer that part there. It definitely is that. It's also a way of her own future self to convince her past self that it's
true,
really
yes,
her.
because she was the most easily sold. That's a good point.
That is the kind of thing, though, of like kind of like trading off of trauma there, because like there are other ways to do that. Because I was thinking about that, and like if you, Mike, or myself, Alex, were to have received a letter from someone purporting to be me in the future, is there a kind of thing like did you or have you thought about something that you would put in that letter to explicitly say, hey, I'm you? You know,
that's
like,
a really good question.
And I'm not saying it to say it, but I'm saying, is there something?
Thank you for that.
Yeah, but it's something to think about, right? Is there something? Right. Is there a way that you think you could either convince your past self that it's you, or something that you would need to see to convince your present self that it was the future running to you? So it serves two functions like that. To go back to your first part of that question, it all comes down to the writer and the level of credibility that person has. You know, like I think someone like Greg Rucka, who has an immense catalog of comic work and also has like a track record of writing complex, interesting, and like deep and meaningful female characters. Doesn't mean he gets a pass to write anything he wants there, but you can go back through his work and say that, yeah, this is someone who writes this with a level of thought and a level of introspection there. So you'd be more accepting of him writing a character like that. I mean, I
think it's
case by case. Yeah.
It's interesting to me that, Brian K. Vaughan depicts the first moment of, a teenage girl having her period in Paper Girls.
Yeah.
And when, like, by the time you got there, if you had been reading his letters in the back, I think his letter in the back of the first issue was like, I'm basically, these were my friends in middle school. Like I only had friends who were girls. This was the group that I ran with. So he kind of had an inside track, like having, a lot of sisters or something, where he felt like, okay, I've got the vantage point and experience, and I'm writing this empathetically rather than as a caricature. Yeah. And I do not think this book is a caricature of, molestation or abuse or anything like that. Brian K. Vaughan writes that as someone who was surrounded by strong female friends at that age. He didn't have a lot of male friends, it sounds like. So he was writing that from a position of empathy rather than as a caricature.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, again, it comes down to, I never want to say that that any writer can't write anything. I don't, to be clear,
I'm not saying that. I'm just saying
I know you're not.
It feels like we live in a world where that's a little bit of the moment we're in.
There is a lot of people saying that, and I don't believe that's true, because you're right. I think anyone can have empathy and perspective on any type of character from any type of experience or circumstance. So I think it just comes down to the way it's handled and ultimately why it's there. Like if it's just there. So, for what we've seen for Heidi right now, you're right. It establishes a couple of character things. Are there other ways they maybe could have established that with her? Again, the idea of trust issues, and then idea of her having trust issues, and then it also being the thing that allows her to trust herself. Are there other ways they could have done that? I'm sure there are. But if it feels like it's thrown in there just for the character trauma, if it doesn't feel like it has a point, I don't care who's writing it. If it's not received well because it doesn't feel like it has a purpose, then it shouldn't belong. And that has nothing to do with who's writing it. It's how it's being written. So I think it is a topic that is always worth pointing out and discussing. Who is telling these stories, who gets to tell these stories, why are they telling these types of stories and things like that. It is always something worth mentioning and observing. But yeah, I'm with you. It doesn't necessarily
and I don't mean
anybody from. Yeah.
exactly. Well, and I also don't mean to otherize people who feel that way about like kind of stay in your lane,
Oh yeah, of
because
course.
I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
the most like I'm watching, I read a lot of Disney books to my 3-year-old daughter, and then she wants to see the movies, and we started showing her. So we read a Peter Pan, picture book for kids that Disney has published in the last 20 years and cleaned up a lot.
Sure, I'm
And when we
sure.
went and watched that movie, I was like, oh my
Oh,
gosh. Like I remembered the
oof.
Tiger Lily scene, but the song What Makes the Red Man Red was just like never
Mhm.
again. We
Yeah,
just can't do it. And I think that was I mean, I don't even need to Google this to be pretty sure. I'm gonna say that was a group of white men, all
yeah,
white, all white, all men in the
yeah,
1950s, thinking they were writing something that was like honoring and respectful of this group.
yeah, yeah,
And it just shows you how like I don't like I there's nothing in it that makes me think that they had malicious intention, but they were just so myopic
yeah,
that they did a lot of damage.
yeah.
And
I
I
mean, yeah,
think that's the argument for representation, right? Is
exactly.
that
Yeah, yeah.
you know um,
You're right because
you saying, "Oh, I'm writing this empathetically. I'm writing this as a positive story."
yeah,
Someone in that group can still has the right to say, um,
you
"Super
missed.
offensive, not cool." Yeah, right? You
Yeah,
missed. Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
exactly.
You're right because the context in which it's created is important, but knowing the context doesn't give you a free pass because you can still screw it up. You're absolutely right. You don't have to have a malicious intent, but doesn't mean just because you're making an attempt, a good faith effort attempt, doesn't mean you're going to get it right. You can still screw it up. You can still have someone being like, nah, man, like you missed, maybe you got close or maybe you missed entirely, but you're right. They're, and it's down to the people in that group for, I think, to have the ultimate say. And so yeah, I don't think it's, it's, as I mentioned, it's something that I think is worth mentioning, something worth observing and pointing out whenever we read these stories, to keep in mind, again, who is telling these stories and who gets to tell them.
Yeah,
What perspective do they have? So, but yeah, no, it is, it again, it really made me think about the idea of like, how would you get yourself to trust that you're you? What kind of
right.
inside, what kind of insight, what could you say to yourself that would say beyond like, as we see them read their various letters, you get things like, well, this is my handwriting, this is how I would, there are like subjective clues that you can say, but the idea of putting something in that is specific to just you, that as Heidi would say, like, there is no one that knows this, not like small group of people. There is no one but me and the other person involved,
Yeah.
and that being the kind of thing. So it's almost like Heidi is using her own trauma against herself.
Well, that's the full weight of it. Is
Yeah.
hiding while reading that there is a meta level of I would never do this to myself unless this was super important,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
why
Yeah.
she's just in immediately. So it's
Yeah. Like
incredibly effective in that way.
it is. It is. It is.
Yeah, I
For her character and her story. Yeah, absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's still if someone objected to it, I think I would have to say that's fair. Like
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
you're
Yeah.
allowed to have a problem with that.
Yeah. Because that is not the only path they could have gone to get Heidi to a similar place. Right.
Right.
There are other ways you can get her character to the same sense of kind of personal isolation and mistrust and all of that. Like there are other ways that it could have gone. They're probably all traumatic in some way, which is maybe a larger conversation there, but it didn't have to be that specific trauma. So
Right.
you're right. In that way, I could see if someone was like, that doesn't sit right with me, be like, yeah, well, I get that. I can see why that would be, and would never dismiss or discount someone's kind of lived experience in that way.
Well, the other thing that I'm particularly sensitive to is what I refer to this article a lot, but there's, I think, a New Yorker piece in 2021 called The Case Against the Trauma Plot, which was, it's basically what all prestige TV is, which is,
Of course, yeah.
every character is interesting because of their trauma, and
Yeah.
everyone is just like a walking DSM-5 manual of trauma symptoms.
Hmm.
And reducing characters to that is not only not interesting and it's not good character work, it's also just not story. And so, um, not only do I not find it interesting and I'm actively repulsed by like trauma plot in general, but I also, when I see something that is blatantly trauma, I get my defenses up a little bit like, all right, you better prove to me that you've got something worth saying. And
Exactly.
you're not just doing this to do it.
For shock value, right? To be like,
Exactly. Yeah.
oh, look what this character has done, right? Yeah, I mean, there. I mean, that is an issue with modern day, current day storytelling is that the only way to make someone interesting is by having them be damaged in some way, so they can overcome
Right.
or
Which,
move
I mean, I think
through.
of the parody of it was on Community when Troy was in an acting class and he had no like real emotional experiences. He was like, you know, didn't get made captain of the football team one time and no one felt sorry for him because he was talking about how hard it was to be popular. So then he made up a story basically like hers, and all of a sudden he was the most interesting actor in the actors group, and like Britta started falling in love with him. And it was like a little bit of a parody of real life, which, Community did regularly and quite
Yeah,
well.
yeah. But that is, you're right. That's a commentary on modern day storytelling, and not even, I mean, beyond, I mean, look at every superhero origin story,
Yes.
so it's always the death of something, the loss of something that drives you to quote unquote become better, right? Become a hero, or even the villains have troubling origin stories, and so yeah,
Well, the
there
good
is an
ones
over
do. Yeah.
there's an over reliance on there's got to be a hook, right? That's what it
Well,
is.
there has to be a reason the audience can understand for everyone to do everything,
Yeah,
which is like I think the problem is that storytelling has trained me to think that way. And when I encounter real people in everyday life, I just sit around at night. I'm like, what in the world is wrong with that person? I can't make heads or tails of anything they say or do.
yeah.
Like, where is the exposition that explains to me why this person is the way they are? But people
Where's
are
the text
much
box? Where's the
exactly
narration?
right. People are much like messier and more complicated than I think a lot of like. Well, they had this background, so now they do this all the time.
Mhm.
And if you want a critique of superhero movies, I think that's it. To say that like, oh, they had one experience and they just immediately pivot to being the person who does this thing all the time this way.
Yeah,
I'm like,
this
that's
one
fair.
event, defines their personality for the rest of their life, and because of superheroes, it shapes the fate of the world. Yeah, so I think I can see that here, and maybe part of that is too the idea of I think it's similar here in that we're giving they're trying to find some level of motivation for these characters. Why would they end up doing potentially? Why would they end up doing the things that they do? I mean, even on a smaller level, Daniel, right? Daniel, who works in like farm tech or whatever, right? He ends up developing a strain of wheat or grain or something that ends up causing like a global famine or whatnot. But we see in his backstory, right, like that this is built off of his father's work, right? And he's supposed to be in there just to shepherd his dad's work, and everyone's like, "Yeah, you got ideas? Great, kid, whatever. You're just here because your dad's here, you know." And
Right.
so it's like on a different level, his motivation to do what the letter claims he did, which is develop this strain which causes this famine. That drive is because apparently he has daddy issues and everyone thinks he's no good, and so he's trying to strive and do this, and he's motivated by this desire to, hey, I'm not just my my dad isn't all there is. I'm trying to do better than that. I have my own ideas. I have my own thoughts. And when he does do that, oh no, you killed the world. And so you're giving all of these characters some level of traumatic backstory, as it were, to help. I think what you said is correct. It gives the audience an understanding as to why they act the way they do versus the way people are, which is just, I don't know, because they're stupid,
Right.
or because they felt that way that day.
Yeah. Anyway, I think this is a fascinating book since it's already got us deep in characters.
Yeah.
And that was after we had a whole discussion about time travel. So it's
Yeah.
just like, this is kind of a cocktail of perfect combinations for me. That said, famously, we say comic endings are hard. So I have no idea where this is going, how they'll stick the landing, if they stick the landing, things like that. But so far, they've got me.
Yeah.
And I love the art, by the way. Can we
I was going to say,
for a moment?
You want to get into Infurnari's art?
I do, because it's like it's a hybrid of several things I love, and he pencils, inks, and colors everything himself, right?
And does letters too. So he's
okay.
He's doing everything on the page, everything you see on the page, he's doing.
Yeah, I love the kind of crude sketch nature of it. That that, well, first of all, anything that has just even 10% vibes of Jeff Lemire's art is just my heart language. So I'm going to be drawn to it. Obviously, these are much more refined, detailed, and distinct characters. But his default is that distressed look on the page, and really, scratchy, thin lines, detailing people's facial features. I think it's great.
I was going to say, it, not so much Lemire. It has echoes of Andrea Sorrentino.
Well, big Sorrentino, the distressed look. Yeah,
exactly. I was going to say, in terms of the vibe and some of the coloring and all that, I think Sorrentino is a little more hyper detailed in the face, in terms of a little more photorealistic. So that's just a style there. But you're right, that distressed look, kind of the heavy hatching and shading and all that, very much feels Sorrentino to me. A lot of shadows and things like that. A lot of use of light and shadow and all that, which I think is very, very cool.
Yeah. Now, there are a couple times, and I found that this was better on reread, so I've redacted my notes slightly. There were a couple times where I found story beats a little difficult to follow when it gets really detailed, because so much stuff is out of focus in his. It's all intentional.
Sure. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Like foreground, background stuff. Yeah. Yeah.
I think there's just a lot of intentional choices. It's like watching a director who is giving you a close up during a big action scene or something like that. And I mean, honestly, I think the simplest silly comparison would be sticking with Lois Lane through the Mr. Terrific fight in Superman 2025. Right? It's like there's all this crazy action whirling around, but you're all just on Lois's face. 60% of the screen is her face watching the reaction to it. And there's this really well choreographed thing going on outside of it. Yeah. A lot of it feels like that, except, so it's like you're seeing what the director wants you to see. You're just curious about what's out of sight.
Because there's more stuff going on.
Exactly. Right. So I couldn't even tell what the big accident in San Francisco was. If it was a bus crash or a bomb or what. And it doesn't, the truth is, it doesn't matter, which is why we don't see it. I'm just curious. And I'll say my only art complaint is the cursive. And I'm going
to bring that up. I was going to bring that up later.
Barely fluent enough in cursive, but I wonder if anyone younger than us can even read cursive.
That was my note. I learned cursive growing up. I had no problem with it. My actual note was, and I know this is putting a lot on Infurnari, who, again, as we say, draws, inks, colors, letters, the whole thing. So I don't want to say he has to do more work. But if they had a separate letterer, someone whose job it was to simply do the lettering, you probably get distinct handwriting, distinct lettering for each of the letters for each of the characters, as opposed to when you see the cursive, you know it's somebody's letter, but you don't know whose it is until you get the context clues from either the art or the actual word itself.
Yeah,
but
I think I just would have preferred rather it being handwritten for legibility's sake. Let's say, okay, all computers in the future are busted. Yeah, typewritten. That's exactly what I was going to say.
Yeah. Well, like I said, if they had done it in a way where each character had a different letter style font for their letter, like that's
even
one of those
color. Yeah, I mean,
but that is one of those extra steps that I think, again, this book being
like Hassan
initially
might do. Yeah,
because it was initially self-published online. It's why it's just the two of them. There probably wasn't. If this was a book that had started at Oni, like we pitched the idea and we're going to start it in print, they may have put a team together and be like, we'll bring in a letterer for this, because that's like that one little extra step that could have made this book really kind of taken another level of just, because again, that's one of those things that you're not going to, you may not clock initially, but you're going to know right away, oh wait, this is a different font, which means it's a different character, and then you start associating that as you work your way through. But the fact that they're all cursive, it's still a visual indicator that this is somebody's letter. This is someone from the future writing to their past self. But you have to wait to figure out whose it is. More to what your point was there. Yeah, I don't know. When did they stop teaching cursive? You said you only barely got it in school. You're only a handful of years younger than me. So
yeah, they made us learn it and write like full papers in it.
Okay.
But by third or fourth grade, you never were required to use it again. But you had the option. You could always choose to write that way, but no one did. I mean, no one chose that path. And my mom, the problem with cursive, and I think this is probably true of print, it's just I read a lot less cursive, is that everyone has their own style of it.
Yes.
And some people connect words and have trailing things and get real lazy and quick with it. Because the thing is, it was invented to be quick, right?
Yeah.
It's like because you don't have to lift the pencil.
Yes.
Yeah. So it was designed to be this quick shorthand way of writing, which it is, but a lot of old ladies, use it and their hands start shaking. They get faster and lazier with it, and it's just like I can only make out every 5 words.
Yeah, it's one of those things that my brain just will process seeing it because I know it, and I grew up reading it. But you're right. At what point would someone pick this book up, even in 2014? When this book first came out, at what point what age would someone have to be to pick it up and be like, what is this font?
Exactly. Yeah.
I
think we're actually pretty close to that.
Yeah, we maybe so. But yeah, that is my one note. I think it was just that has something else, that little bit extra would have been a neat visual flair. But outside of that, I agree. I think the way that they use color and shadow, sometimes going into monochrome, sometimes just like blue line, for emphasis. I just scrolled past it on my tablet here, but when you mentioned when the bomb goes off in San Francisco, which is that setup, I think is a great intro into how are these characters going to react to this future information. Grady finds Heidi and is like, you got to come with me. And don't worry, when the thing happens that's going to happen, you'll know what to do, which is she's the one that's taking the pictures of Grady saving these people, because Grady had the newspaper that says he saves these people and the pictures were taken by Heidi. So instead of trying to stop the bomb, he lets it play out because he feels he's supposed to, because that's what puts him in the national spotlight, which then is the first step into.
She tells him to. I mean, exactly, she doesn't know what she's telling him to do, but she was like, "No, man, you gotta
And then
do what you're supposed
afterwards,
to do if it's going to save people. And
then afterwards, when she sees that he had the paper and saw that, but I was scrolling through that, and when you talked about the idea of focus and kind of perspective there, when Heidi is taking those shots, oftentimes you see her in the background and she's just kind of gray outline, and the subject of what she's taking the picture of is what's in the foreground, and that's in color and that's in focus. And so we see her kind of observing, and the way that's flipped and utilized. When Natasha in the next issue, or maybe the issue after, when she is driving into San Francisco and kind of in a panic, trying to, because Grady's there and Heidi's there and all that stuff, trying to find their friends, the way that Infurnari kind of again plays with color and shading. When she leaves Daniel on the bridge and Daniel's just kind of in blue, kind of gray, and then everyone around him, this chaos of this traffic is just blue line. The way that they both add and take away color and things like that, I think is to me very visually appealing. I like that breakup, that it's not just solid backgrounds. Sometimes the backgrounds are detailed, sometimes they're not. The way that they lay the page out, that Infurnari is doing that, I think is really, really cool. And it keeps my eye as a reader active. It keeps my eye engaged. And I love that in the story.
I certainly don't want to end on this note, but did you happen to have a particular obscure West Wing comp during that photograph scene? Yes, I knew I would stump you because it's season 5.
Is that
the Jason Isaacs thing?
I was going to say
he's the photographer and Donna blows up.
And
then he just very kind of sadly goes back, but is still taking pictures. Like, I guess this is my job. When she just like hands the camera off and doesn't want credit or money or anything, I was like, oh, this is so much like that bizarre moment. So anyway, I'm never more than 1 or 2 steps away from a West Wing comp. So I'm glad I was able to squeeze it in.
We got a guy who's going to become president in our story. So,
That's
politics
true.
Still well and alive.
I think this one might resemble more a show like Scandal or House of Cards.
Yeah, probably so. Yeah.
Than a West Wing. Like, it doesn't strike me as a... Right. Does not strike me as a Matt Santos or even a Arnie Vinnick.
Yeah. It doesn't seem that Grady is super competent. He seems to be fairly charismatic and likable, but he may not have the strongest platform.
He's got a close circle of 5 friends, and I'd be stunned if all 4 of his friends voted for him. It's like, oh, people who know him.
He's married
vote for him.
In the future. He's married to Natasha, right? She is first lady, but she is off having an affair with Daniel still. It's possible Natasha didn't vote for him, like 1,000%.
Yes,
right. So and Heidi probably didn't, or at least probably won't now. Given what the friends know now, that they have this info from the future, clearly none of them would vote for Grady now. But yeah, even if there was, if there was a virgin timeline the first time through, I doubt, I doubt Heidi. I doubt either of the ladies voted for Grady. For presidency.
I think that's probably true.
Yeah. He does seem like that kind of friend where he's your friend, but only because he's been your friend.
Exactly. Yes, he's one of those.
Yeah. Like, why are you friends with this guy? I don't know, because we've been friends, and it's just like it's more just kind of like through inertia than like anything active that anyone from either side actually puts effort into the friendship. But yeah, no, I mean, it's so we're left with this again, with this setup of like the book, the volume ends with everyone meeting Grady, old Grady, and then all 5 of them coming back together after the bombing, back to, I guess it's Heidi's place, right? Where now the 5 of them have now met old like kind of hideously scarred Grady. We didn't mention that too, right? That President Grady has
seen
this
some
big
stuff. Yeah.
exactly. He has lived a life. But yeah, so we end on the cliffhanger of like, okay, if there was any doubt before that this stuff was true, like here is Grady meeting the future version of himself, who has come back to the past now for you know, reasons unknown yet. But yeah, that's where we leave off from a story standpoint, which is pretty good driving force to jump into the next volume.
Yeah. And that's all my notes for this one because I don't want to get so far into speculation that
Yeah.
kind of like Letter 44, where I was like, I really love the political thriller of the week thing. And then when it didn't do that, I started getting disappointed in the book
Yeah.
through no fault of its own, just through the expectations I had set for myself.
Yeah. Yeah.
So anyway,
so I will say from an expectation standpoint, I guess, I mean, so one thing you can assume is that the story is going to continue to unravel in two timelines, right? That
yes.
we're going to be getting information both from the future and from our present here as well. So I guess what I would say is there a point for you from a story like this where would you prefer if it was like we stick to one timeline and everything gets diffused to the audience through just like we're learning things as our past characters are learning through them, or do you want as the reader to know the future events? Like do you want to be ahead of the characters, I guess is what I'm saying, in these types of stories? Do you want to know more than them? Because I
no,
what I'll say
because
is
to me, like it ruins a little bit of it. Like, so I'm a tough case here because part of me would love it if as a flex in like issue 5 they just show you a full issue of future stuff that makes no sense. Mm-hmm. And then you jump back and are strictly in the past. Like, and you start seeing shadows of those. You start seeing the what forms the shadows of what's in the future, rather than hopping back and forth. And what I don't like about the hopping back and forth is I don't like the cheap same issue setup and payoff. Like
mirrored events.
It feels it feels like I mean it feels like people trying to take credit for playing long ball when it's like, no, you set that up 3 pages ago. I know that it's 30 years in the future, but you literally wrote these things concurrently at the same time and then deployed them within 3 minutes of each other as I experience it. Mm-hmm. So I would either love it if they knew where it was going the whole time and they drop all the future stuff on you at the end and you reach it to the point where if it's closed loop, the last panel is them saying like, here's a piece of paper, start writing a letter to your past self. Yeah. Something like that where you like kind of earn that like setup payoff of like, here's where the first issue started, and now you go back and read it again or something like that. So I don't know. That's my thought. How about you?
I personally, I like it. I like being ahead of the characters. And in this case, I'm calling our characters, our main characters, our past version of the characters, the ones we start with, because they're the ones who have to learn about the things. So I'm calling them like the prime versions as our main characters, our main POV. I enjoy being ahead of the characters in the story, I think because I like process. And so I like to see how the creators dole out information to the characters and how that infuses the story. And so if they give information to the audience and then ahead of the characters, and then we watch as the characters uncover or learn about that information, I like to see what that process is. I like to see the thought process of the creators of saying, we're going to set this up here so the audience knows what's coming. And then we see how the characters get to that. And then, how they learn that information, how they catch up to the audience. Because sometimes it's very clever. Sometimes it shows that they have a plan. They know what they're doing. Sometimes they're making it up as they go and it still ends up being clever. right?
Right.
And sometimes they have a plan, and you're like, well, that plan sucked, you know. It's like a How I Met Your Mother kind of thing, or a Lost kind of thing, or a Battlestar Galactica thing. Like, you don't have to have a plan, but
that's true. But
because even if you have a plan, the plan could still be bad. But I like to see that process. I like to see how they throw something out there, knowing that we're going to get to this at some point. So we're going to give this to the audience so they have this in mind. We want them thinking about this as we tell our story. And then they either figure out a way in real time or have execute a plan they already laid out. But I like to see how they then navigate their characters through that story to get to the end point or whatever midpoint, whatever large information that they put on the audience. I like to see that and watch how that goes. I don't like being in the dark with characters, at least for a story like this where time travel and future information is involved. There are some times you just want the POV of the character because that's what the story is. And it's about them learning about things in real time. When it comes to a time travel story like this or any kind of time manipulation, I like having advanced information. I like being ahead of the characters, just so I can see how the creators work their way through the story.
Yeah,
in that case, I care more about the mechanics of the story than the story itself.
Okay,
which
so
is maybe it's a me thing.
I think small distinction, and I think you probably agree with this. I like being a little bit ahead of the characters, but I don't like being ahead of the story, like the storytelling. Like, I want the storytelling to be slightly out of my reach.
I see. And okay, yeah, that is a distinction, but that's a key one. I think that's where you and I will be at a divide, because I don't mind being ahead of the story in either case. I feel like
if I'm ahead of the story, they're not doing a good enough job storytelling.
I'm sorry. If I figure out what the story is on my own ahead of it, that I think is bad storytelling. I don't mind if the creators are saying,
they're letting you in on it, right?
We're putting you here and we want you here, and then the characters are going to catch up. That's a different story. Yeah. If you're able to figure out what the story is, if you can put yourself ahead of the story, that is usually a sign of bad storytelling. And I'm with you on that. If the creator's goal is to keep you in the dark and you can like peek around the corner and be like, oh no, wait, I can see what's coming there. That
right. If they're telegraphing things, or they're just telegraphing
things that
making
they're trying
too much
to hide,
a meal
right?
of each moment, or
right?
something, Yes, they're telegraphing things they're
unintentionally. Things, yes, absolutely. Yeah, that I'm with you is usually a sign of bad storytelling, and I don't enjoy that.
And there's none of that here. That's not what I'm saying.
No, yeah. But you're saying we're talking in general for these types of stories where there is some level of ball hiding here, right? There's no matter what you're doing with this type of story, anytime there's time travel involved, you're trying to hide something at some point, and there's always some level of reveal. And so it just comes down to, what are they hiding when? What are they revealing when? How are they revealing it? How are they hiding it? And if you're able to telegraph, if you're able as the reader to decipher what's coming, and then that's what happens, and not so good. But yeah, if they're able to show you things that they want you to know and still keep other things in the dark to surprise you, that's when storytelling, I think that's when this type of storytelling really works for me. When they can show you the shiny thing and you're like, I can see that or recognize that, and inherently there's some other reveal coming, but you can't figure out what that is, so you're still in the dark as a reader. That's the stuff that I really love.
Yes.
Yeah.
Totally agree.
Yep.
Awesome. All right. Well, we will see you guys next week for issues 5 through, is it 10? I can't remember the breakdown.
5 through 9.
5 through 9. Up to 10. I messed that up wording wise every time.
Well, because this one, it's 19 issues broken down into 4 again. Because issue 1 here is a double-sized issue. It is 5 issues worth of material, but it's only 4 issues. The next 3 volumes are all 5 issues each. So 5 through 9, volume 2 of the Bunker is what we'll be coming to next week.
All right. Well, we'll see you then, and hope you continue to enjoy the story, read along, and find us all the places: Blue Sky, StoriedArcs.com mainly, and on Instagram. And we will see you next week.
Peace.